Okay, so one of the things that, the last thing that we have on the agenda for today is just kind of this conversation about integration. And it really is, we've been talking a lot about, there's a lot coming at us. We have new infrastructure capabilities. We're really starting to kind of understand cloud technology and capabilities now. For me personally, as I've been looking at the IDME capabilities and some of the stuff that we've talked about there, like it just made it really clear to me, especially, you know, the proof of concept that we did for the IDME data architecture, just how fast the data architects were able to get stuff done and the data engineers were able to get stuff done using cloud native tools. And so I think we're at a point where there's opportunities that are in our future, and that we have been so successful with data integration in our community already that there's things that we want to be able to say, yeah, when we're talking about integration, these are things that we absolutely want to make sure that we're keeping or that we're prioritizing. And here's some challenges that we've experienced that we want to make sure that we can try and mitigate if possible. And so while it's easy to go to Irwin because it's our primary integration capability, I think the applications all have other integrations that they do. Like I know iRock's got other integrations that they do. We've been talking about the Viper integration. We've got the SAM integration with OIS. Like there's other integrations that are going on. There's other ways that we're sharing data in the community. And so I just kind of wanted us to have a little bit of time to brainstorm and just kind of chat about what we've learned and what we would want to make sure we take forward as we're thinking about these new technologies and new capabilities in the future.
So I have something. Last night I couldn't sleep, so I had to think about it. And so basically, I was thinking about it last night that it seems like all these applications, I know it's helping plans and the IT, the Intel folks and operations. But I think there's a future for cost or finance, because I look at it as an incident management team. You have finance, you know, plans, ops, you know, and all those people that go with that. And so, but finance, I think, is one thing that's going to be coming down the road, because it's such a, these fires are costing so much money, and we're not accounting for even all the FDIDs that are showing up on our fires without a resource order. But there's a cost incurred. So the IBAs at home, after that fire is gone and done, those IBAs are working on it all winter into the next year, cleaning up the cost portion of that fire with the cost shares and everything that's going on. I mean, it seems like we're seeing more FDID showing up at our fires and they're not on a resource order. But the feds are incurring the cost to the state. They're going through the state mode, but the state's asking the feds to reimburse them for all those costs that are incurred. So I think that eventually, I think down the road, that's going to be something that will probably come into play. It'll probably be a little more touchy because maybe it's not going to be available to everybody. But I think that shoring up those costs on the incidents, I think that's a big push, because in the last 5 years, there's an INDA assigned to every large fire, and managing those costs and trying to track down and cut those costs, because these costs of these fires have just gotten outrageous. You know, we don't go direct anymore on these timber fires for logging, and we're spending months on end on these large fires, and the cost of that fire is so high. We have more loggers than we have firefighters on some of those timber fires. So I think the cost, at least maybe not in the brush, not in the sagebrush. You guys, you know, they still fight fire, but in the timber fires, we're going way indirect and we're logging basically. And I think that that's going to be something. Those IBAs at home, once all the teams leave, the IBAs have a mess to clean up into the next year, trying to track down those costs, because we've lost resources, or resources didn't have a resource order, and then the state's saying we have to pay them for this resource that was there. And so I think that that's going to be something that will be an integration at some point. I'm not saying tomorrow, I'm not saying, I think that's going to be something, but it's a fire incident business thing that will have to come to us. But I do see it coming down the road, just because I think these costs of these fires are just breaking all records every year.
And it sounds to me like there's a little bit of difference in that data that the incident and resource data that we've been really moving through the environment right now. It's been pretty much open, but you think there's a sensitivity or?
I think that maybe I'm not sure, like with all the contracts and everything, I mean, we get the contract number, we don't get the cost of that resource, right? That's handled at a different level. But I think that it could come down the road.
But the contract number is associated with a WBS item, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there was an attempt, I don't want to belabor this topic, but that's a great one. I think there was an effort a number of years ago to try to integrate financial data from the WBS environments to be associated with the Irwin GUID. And so.
No.
Or service specific, but it's gonna leverage some opportunities.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that for the folks online? We can't hear you in the back there.
I have a loud voice, but I just said, I think tomorrow the conversation of the double IPA, which is in the Irwin discussion, is probably gonna talk about portions of that. And I think it will allow, or at least open the gate to talk about some of the physical back end stuff, very specific to the Forest Service. So.
Yeah, so the double IPA effort in relationship to Viper, Ben is supposed to come in, or at least in the morning, do a bit of a presentation on kind of where that's at. And so some of that conversation with the Viper folks and the Irwin team, I think is going to move things forward, but it is very Forest Service specific. So after several years, this is a great story. So after several years of talking to the Department of Interior Business Information Office, bio team.
Yep.
Like they just randomly said, oh, well, we have a change management process that if you submit a change request for FBMS, that this organization has to respond in 30 days to tell you that before they're implemented in FBMS. And it's like, really, it took you 3 years to tell me about this? So I think that that kind of one of the things that we're thinking about is that as this conversation around Viper and WIPA is moving forward, that if we can kind of start figuring out what we want to do in the interagency side, that then we can submit a change request to FBMS on the DOI side, and that we might be able to move this ball forward. So, and the thing is, DOI has some funding. Tell us if we need to. It's been sitting. It was ear tagged a long time ago, and it's been sitting for quite a while. So I'm trying to get this done. Full.
Well, I mean, you and I have had these conversations for years now, Rochelle, with various different teams about cost and, all this kind of stuff. I mean, we specifically looked at aviation for, I don't know, how many weeks months did we meet with, various teams from DOI and Forest Service? And we still got nowhere because it's a very tough nut to crack.
It is.
Financial systems.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't easy. We got nowhere.
Yeah, and it's like when they explained how those poor business folks are trying to track down invoices and figure out whether or not something actually showed up on a fire, and like it is a wonder anything gets paid. It's a wonder anything gets paid, or that we aren't paying 3 times. It's crazy. So yeah, I do think the financial data is going to be. I think you're right, Gina, that it's coming at us.
It may sit in a separate place because of the security behind it. They are tied to those financial systems, but it would be something like that. But if we could access a component of it, into our programs, maybe that would be helpful. Maybe not everything, because they don't want to tie into their financial systems because they don't want those. I'm sure there's security around all that.
Yeah.
So, but I think there might be some data we could extract from there. But I think, right now we focus on the planning and operations of everything, and firefighting really hasn't changed. Well, you still use tools and water, it hasn't changed since last week. So you may have a trucks and things that fly over us, but that's not it. You still have to have a strong back and fight, build fire line. pop it up.
Got 10 minutes.
John?
So, yeah, my experience with the financial systems, unless it's truly in their interest, they will not. Because we ran into that with IWDB way back when we were providing, we allowed them direct database access into our system, and we Rebels built that's in the fire code, Rebels built a REST service. And oh my God, they gave us the normal project management line or any line. Well, we haven't planned for this. We have to have 2-year out investments and coding in this whole. I was like, hey, that's okay. We just built it in case you need it because then you can control everything. And it was 6 months later when because we were using an enterprise service bus, the enterprise service bus died and broke. And ironically, 3 days later, they used the service and have been using it ever since. Because it was in their interest. And sadly, I find the same with FBMS. They refuse to pull. So with fire code, I know what it is. We literally copy fire code data to a flat file. It gets secure FTP to a BLM server at the NOC to a folder, which is then pushed to FBMS. Wow, that's 1990.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, hello, 1993. Welcome back.
And yet we've had this service going, an old service going 5 years. So same thing, we're wanting to stabilize fire code into a new environment. We're gonna do that, but we have to replicate that old way. Similar with weather, we had to create a secure shell server. We ended up having to build our own custom one for wind because WIMs refused to change. And then once we built the new service and it worked wonderfully for everyone else, they finally went ahead and started consuming it because it was way simpler. They got everything. So our challenge is just that.
Yeah, they're
Once
those
again, it's mother and apple pie. We talk about it. Everyone agrees with it. But when you come down and talk to their security people, the other people, we just can't get over those humps. They're just silly.
Yeah.
You know what, we're gonna just counter that a little bit because of the several fires that the Forest Service has had down to the last one in New Mexico, the year before last. There was a little slash burn that got away and it kind of blew up on it, lots of teams on it. Well, there was so much of a financial crisis down there. This is from the IDAs and the finance section chiefs. They had strike teams going down there all summer trying to clean up that mess because vendors had not been paid for 3 months. And so these crises are happening on these big fires. And I think they are going to come to us and say, how can we do a better job tracking this?
Because it's in their interest.
It is in their
I agree. That's when they'll do it.
At least on the Forest Service side, I know we're getting pressure to try to do a better job. That's why INBAs are assigned. And even the DOI has INBAs now assigned to some of their fires. When I was down in Colorado, and there's a lot of young people that are going out as INBAs and they're very good. And they're trying to hold these teams accountable for ordering everything in the world that they really don't need. So it is happening. I've even seen it on the DOI side because I was in Colorado last year and they had an INBA and she was very good. And she was a local one, but she was very good. And she was on those teams to make sure that they were not overstepping their bounds. So it's happening. I think that as we move down the road, the cost of these fires have gone up so much and we're getting charges every which way. And I think that there's going to be something that has to give some better system, the better track and make payments, the true payments that we need to make and not be paying people more than what they should be getting, right? It's going both ways. So I think
neither system actually takes changes to fire code.
Right.
Which is just asinine. I mean, they only take the initial one and then they're not, even if we invalidate it, they don't ever care and consume it. It's not efficient. So we want them to change. Maybe they will.
So
We've got 2 online.
you got 2 online?
Tim,
Tim, both are.
So I had just one item that using Irwin is kind of like everybody knows is when like incidents came out, it was kind of like we wanted this like complete record. Everyone contributed to the fire record to get the complete picture of what happens. But as we move, that's a good thing. We need that, but we also have to recognize sometimes data exchange is more conversational. Like we're seeing in the resources layer, like for capability requests. Like we want a CAD will create a request and then IROC, we want a request number back, or like in the incident layer, we want a fire code. And, is fire code true? Yes. And then we want a fire code coming back. So one system's given data to trigger another system to send something back. That's kind of that transactional data. So as you're looking at integrations, realize some are static and some more transactional.
That's a really good, that's a good description, Tim. I appreciate that. Any thoughts on that or response to that? You're getting nods around the room here. So Rick.
Yeah, so on the note of financial data, not all of our applications are set up for incident management teams. WFDS's main audience is the line officers and decision makers who are making decisions about what kind of latitude to give those teams. Financial data has always been something that we have looked to put available for a decision maker, and we are definitely looking for some better sources of it. So if that is something that we can get access to, be able to show some of those costs to for an incident to the people who are making decisions on it, we'd be all for that.
Okay.
Well, that's coming, right? That's coming with the ESP connection. Some spaces, and I'm super sorry, everybody. I had to step out for a minute, so I don't want to reiterate that's already been said. So are we acknowledging when we're of the things that we're working on, or just some of the gaps that we're identifying?
Just doing a little brainstorming, and Gina said, with the increasing cost of fire, the financial data, we need to really start looking at how we're going to integrate that.
Live data.
So as Jill pointed out, we're going to have some of that conversation tomorrow with WIPA.
Yeah.
So, boy, I don't know. That was really close. Both of your hands went up at the same time. Okay, Brad.
So, Cole, you were talking about getting aviation.
Yeah.
Costs for Forest Service?
You were in those meetings, I think.
Yeah, because we get that from IBS.
Yeah, I still think we could get them from both sides.
What we get from IBS is what you would want. I can get with you afterwards.
Okay.
Because, yeah, the aviation, they're using the data that we have for all of their budget reporting to get funding for retardant.
Gotcha.
So,
I guess I never knew that we got to the point where we had something contemplated, but maybe I have the problem.
okay, yep.
Yeah.
And then one other quick one. So looked at the architecture yesterday, the enterprise big cloud. Are you looking at one big cloud somewhere that's going to host this, or several? And do you have any thoughts of where this is going?
So I don't think there's a decision around that yet. So if we use, and Brandon can jump in here on this because he's probably closer to this than I am. If we use the Department of Interior's way forward of providing this capability, they have a mandatory IDIQ to use. And there's already 10 vendors on that, and those 10 vendors have already architected, or they developed their solutions for what we asked for, right? And the majority of those, I don't know if all of them, and I'll ask Brandon about that, but I think the majority of them are all AWS. So although Rochelle just shared with me in the hallway that the OCIO themselves, apparently they're not going to use their own contract, and they're moving to Azure.
Well, it was a conversation with the Associate Chief Data Officer for the Office of the Secretary of Interior. Was when we met with him, he was indicated that DOI was moving more to Azure, and so I just.
So, and either or, it's of no real relevance, because these services, if they're just, AWS is more mature in the service catalog that they have. But even if it goes to an Azure cloud or even an IBM cloud or something like that, if they don't have the services that we need to execute our full mission set, you can buy those to implement, just like we did with Matillion and Snowflake. And so there's always a way to get at the service, I guess.
Have you considered Fireness at Arrows? At sea that has contract in place to support with 24/7 that could build out a cloud interagency solution?
So I'm gonna Like, I think you guys should sidebar on that. Yeah,
We can.
because I kind of want to capture some of these lessons learned about integration or priorities for integration. Steve?
So I'm not a planner, so I don't deal with the financial stuff like I used to, but I think that idea of being able to readily identify the actual expenditures on an incident, very, that's the move. I don't understand why it's so hard to. Not happening. I guess what I would say though is, if you look at business needs or financial information, there's actually a pretty broad spectrum. It's just reasonable estimations of cost. You know, we can do a lot of planning based on reasonable estimations of cost. I think we kind of fall in this trap where we feel like we don't know anything and we don't know everything. And this is one of those cases where, you know, I think we could potentially just, you know, continue to elicit estimated cost data, you know, incident people, our managers. We have no way to indicate their degree of confidence in life. So there could be some ancillary information that accompanies that, where, you know, somebody says, hey, that's just a swag. Somebody says, we did pretty good cover accounting, or actually had an intensive audit. This is something we sustain. And, you know, some subset of our total incident records has, you know, cost estimations of high confidence. And planners will be happy. I mean, we'll be done up with their own data, because then they'll be outside the cost data. They'll have to be accountable for it. That's, you know, that's what Gene's talking about. So, you know, I think this might be one of those places where instead of trying to get the 100% solution, we should probably just recognize the difficulties that we had, provide some adjunct data to go with what we've got. You know, and I can see my agency, for example, saying, look, we were striving to have 10% of the incidents have high cost estimations. You know, people will do that, but a lot of them have really good data. We can't tell you if they're good or bad.
Yeah.
What we got.
Well, because we don't identify it to that level, right? Like what are you saying? Like there's the estimate, there's the actual, there's the however you want to put on it, you know what I mean? So that you can quantify it in that.
I think, Steve, where I'm coming from is the last couple of years, the finance section chiefs, they bring in 2 or 3 of them and they end up staying later. Then their team goes and they have to stay behind to clean up the mess, right? Because of the previous teams, we do 2-week assignments, right? So you have people rotating in and out all summer long and they're cleaning up this mess. And they bring in a team of finance section chiefs that have to stay there and try to help clean it up before it's passed over to the local source, to the IBA. And that's what I've been seeing. It seems to be getting worse because of the, whatever, I don't know what's going on out there, but finance section chiefs are staying behind and staying another week just to try to help get those packages ready, right, for payment. So that's what I've been seeing the last several years. And that's why I think there's a problem that's going on out there.
Why that happens, I'm not so sure, but when that happens, you know, I mean, we know on that final 209 that that's a really good cost estimate versus a Osage agency buyer where they just pull the number out of their butt.
I mean, there's a little spreadsheet in there, right? Texas, what did 3
It's someone who's never ever.
Event
My
plan
pay is,
section.
well, my pay is never been what it is. And for me, it's one direction, but for other people, it's the opposite. So it just uses the AD matrix. Yeah. And it's the best swag at that point, but.
I mean, they're trying to figure out when the vendor left, right? Because there's no tracking that when that vendor left. When was the last signed document? You know, they're going through their files and things are a mess. When you have team after team rotating in and out, you know, you're cleaning up messes and you're so busy, you don't have time to go back through all those records. So there's always this mess at the very end on those long, I'm not talking those brush fires. I'm talking those long running timber fires that go all summer. And those are where I think the cost has really hit us, because those packages handed over to the IBA. Now they have to work through all of the cost shares that have happened. all through the winter into the spring, and they still don't get them done by the next summer.
Well, and I think too, it's our source, right? So 209 is probably not going to be all. But when we bring on, like, units, we bring on these finance, we can actually have what was truly charged. But we also know sometimes it's 2 years later.
Yeah.
At this point that we get enough.
The 209 is a communications tool, that's the challenge. It's really, I mean, not truly, we use the data, we should make.
Well, no, and it's called.
Jason doesn't have an opinion at all.
It's not official data.
We did the two study on it.
Yeah.
10 years ago, and.
Oh, you
and
mean
we
the
were
last time
shocked and
209 was
terrified
fresh?
When we found out that there were people, Justice Department people using that for attainment, non-attainment of air sheds and using the 209 data to send tickets and people to industries, and you were just like.
Oh, yeah.
It could be, doesn't mean it was that day, it could have been 3 days before, 2 days before, I mean, yeah, we were just shocked and cringing when we heard that.
And it clearly says this is an estimate. There's nowhere on the 209 that says actual.
And when we send stuff out or we point people to the warehouse, we tell them, these are the two things you don't rely on, structures lost and cost.
Yeah, so to switch gears, you know, she here, as we did so much sad. But I guess I think we're working at a pace in interagency, but really driven because Forest Service is one that holds the agreements. But at the pace we're being asked to do things and the group that we're working with right now are all shaking their heads, but on things that are for like service, and there isn't data standards for them. So yes, I just would like to daylight the challenge that we're having is that we're being asked to write agreements, the contracts in place, things there are not data standards for because we captured easy stuff like an engine of the VIN number or something with a serial number. And so I'm wanting to be very transparent in that we're working in an environment where there aren't data standards. And so I would like to know if there's a good solution on how to not get ourselves in trouble with the cart before the horse again, but knowing that we're being asked to have those agreements in place and data standards take years to get across. And so I just want me to kind of chat about that at some stage. So.
Yeah, I think that's Jill, I think that's a really good component of foundational data integration, right? Like, I think the work that the Force Task Group did with the 38 common and critical data elements, we really, even though we had to do work on them when we started implementing them in Irwin, the fact that we had them to start with, right, was such, I think was part of the reason that Irwin was able to be successful the way it was right out of the gate. But Chuck is dealing with the same thing on the fire environment side, right? Like there's so many missing data standards. So I think that is, it's the #1 goal in the NWCG data strategy. And so it's a reminder that like you do need to get those data standards, or we need to have some other mechanism for ensuring that we have an interagency agreement about what something means.
I guess I would add just a little bit to that, unless you wanted to.
No, go ahead.
In that, first of all, I think we're doing something better, right? We meet every other week. We're having these conversations.
But we're clarifying, we're no one in this fence army. We're not chartered, we're not being, so we could have some solutions, but I don't know how to get those right.
Well, I think
care of being there's helpful, but.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, right? So technically, the DMC is the data steward for Irwin and Inform. So they are a data steward. So I'm
business steward.
Yeah, business steward. So I meet with Rochelle's teams Monday, right? We have a conversation about what we're working on and what we're navigating through, et cetera. And like all of these conversations that we're having with our we're sharing. And so there are those things, right? Cart horse. I think even when IROC was being developed, we had, I don't remember at any point, 163 data elements that time. And you grandfather goes through. It's meant to be. When Irwin first started, there was some complex, incident complex, but not, it wasn't an NWCG in the category. The community consensus that we needed to move forward. The other thing is, I think that's changed since then, is the data standards and terminology board, which is got a pretty good, cadence, right? And a pretty good workflow as far as when we submit them and then getting those approved and getting them into the system. We're building what you need right now. So for example, we're talking about a service ID. We're talking about what it means to, you don't have any uniqueness to this. So it's, you don't have a VIN, as Jill says, working to build
Or a
what
name.
that standard is gonna look like.
Or a name,
Or a name,
yeah.
or even a name. Right now, we've got a working name. Back to the 4 app, right? We have a working name. So what we're gonna use, in the interim of being able to sort of land this, and that'll get shared with all of these groups. We're not doing anything without the coordination of the whole group. The other one that's a challenge that they're working on is this infinite number of supplies. That's sort of been a head scratcher where usually it's like, okay, there's Lori, there's Elizabeth, and there's Gina, and those are individual units of people. And now we have infinite number of porta potties, and how do we track those? It's an infinite number. So we're working through a sort of process to manage those kinds of things. Because we are looking for it now.
So Jill, I think, yes, having Kara in that conversation condition as the process is good, but we are looking at ways to try and accelerate that, the data standards process. And I think that conversation that we've had about, which is a really, really recent conversation about, like, can we apply this concept of scope and impact to the development of data standards? It's one that I floated up to the NWCG program management unit a couple of weeks ago. And we want to have some additional conversations with them, because part of what we want to be able to do is move stuff through faster to meet some of these more urgent needs. And like Kara said, we kind of did that, I guess, with some of the stuff, like some of the standards that we grandfathered in from IROC, right? Like the scope was very specific. The impact to other applications was pretty narrow. And so we just said, okay, we're just going to grandfather these in and not go through this big process. And so as you guys are kind of working through this, you're actually doing the hard work of data standards, which is coming to that agreement, like getting clear about what that stuff means. And then we can move it through the process pretty fast to get things approved. But it is a little bit of a cart and horse kind of thing. But yeah, I appreciate that.
I'll just throw out that with IROC, there's different data standards of who does what. The integration data standards, what's flowing through the systems, the catalog item data standards, there's different NWCG committees that approve, disapprove, aircraft versus crews versus equipment, supplies, whether it's the NIAC committee, National Interagency Aviation Committee versus the NWCG Equipment Technology Committee versus Incident Business Committee. There's all these committees that have tentacles to stuff, that it's not just data management committee. There's all other committees too that are part of it.
That's not, it's gonna bring up what are the ones we're trying to get through, the medical people, Jill?
Yeah. Emergency
Yeah.
medical committee.
Yeah. So and they, they're strapped for time too, so.
Yeah.
You hit roadblocks all over the place with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so think about that process, right? We're open to changing the process. It's pretty mature at this point in time. But if there's opportunities for us to engage earlier, maybe to help with some stuff, that I'd be interested in that as well.
Is there, maybe since we're mature now.
Yeah, look at all our grades.
Well, I know why we fell behind on data standards. We ran into just how NWCG did things back then. And it was all or nothing. If you did not fill out all 48 fields precisely as it was submitted, it was rejected. We actually gave up. And that
Yeah.
was, that was really for 6 years, 7 years, and IQCS and some of those systems were that way. Because we were being told after we were done, delivered O&M, and they're like, well, you have to give us all these, and it was like, no, we're not gonna go spend $500,000 to pay a contractor to come and build them again. Standards. We gave up a lot, so. That said, I think of some of my systems, I have a data dictionary, we've got probably 100 and something data elements that are in there that we have used our own definitions. It seems like we should try to figure out a way that, one, you know, and I think I should, the data dictionary actually done it. But it's just one of those, one is be able to have, maybe put that in there. Second is, try to see if it actually is supposed to match with anything we currently, and if it doesn't, then just start that process of, well, maybe this is our default. You know, it's terrible, we don't have all the information, but maybe we can build on it, because we do have a lot of legacy systems that are doing it. And it seems like we can make it better, so that when the next person comes along and say, hey, right now, this is the best we got. And we either use them to make it better, and then have us change it, or vice versa. Feels like we should be able to do something like that. I look, like I said, I'm embarrassing, but I look at some of these terms we have in like weather. You know, class. Oh, well, that must be fire regime. No, that's that for us. It's permanent. It's portable. You know, I mean, we're using the same words for things that mean differently. I think eventually we could change that.
Yeah.
We could try to figure out one of our iterations to change it and make our need for, you know, what's a RAWS class. And here's what it is, and still to do it, make it better, because I do think we want to share it. Like I said, do we maybe have a method we can try to figure some of that? Because that's that data analysis. Data analysis. I don't have access to data analysis, but I'd love to have access to.
So kind of what I'm hearing is this idea that, so we're doing this work to create these data inventories anyway, that then if we start bringing these data dictionaries and these data inventories together, we start doing some comparisons, and we come up with, let's say that, you know, 70% of them match across all of the applications that are using them, then we should just default those through, right? And then we only focus on the things that we actually need to put some time and energy into. So I've got Brandon, and then Kara, and then Chuck.
All right, we've kind of gone for a loop since I wanted to raise my hand, but I just want to clarify, because words have meaning. Because words have meaning. I understand that the data committee is the business steward for Inform. It was my understanding that they're the data steward for Irwin, not the business steward for Irwin. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So on this diagram, that on each of those cans, there's an NWCG committee. And so those were what we designated as the business stewards for that functional area within that business subject area. And so the data management committee is the business steward for Irwin, Inform, EGP, IDME. I think that's it.
What is your definition of a business?
And when did that happen? Because both myself and Kara were not aware that you guys were a business steward first.
I think it's just a word. So I was like, is it business steward or business steward? Because in my mind, I was talking that. We always thought of ourselves as business leads and advocating for the business of the application. Right. And so I think it's something we can talk about offline, just sort of understanding the terminology. Certainly not.
No, but I think it's an important concept, right? Because so an example of why I think the business steward role is an important role, and it's different than a business lead. So a business steward should not be involved in the day-to-day operations or planning or approving, like, you know, the agile backlog and grooming, like not at all what the DMC's role is in that. But if you remember, not last summer, but it's the summer before, I think it was the summer before, IncyWeb, there was a big update for IncyWeb, right? And they were getting ready to roll it out in July. They were going to roll out this big change to IncyWeb. And it started bubbling up in a couple of different places. And so I went to to CEPC that has the PIO subcommittee and was like, how are you guys engaging in this? And the chair was like, I don't even know about it, right? And so all of a sudden, the PIO subcommittee brought that change to NCWeb in and talked about it as an interagency collective. And we're able to say, no, this isn't ready to go and it can't go in July. And so they worked with Steve Nelson and they rolled that back and then they, so.
Although to be fair, they were asked to engage.
Yeah, there was a chair, there was a chair change, which helped, right? But the point is that when an application, like, that's part of why we talk about these NWCG committees as business stewards for these applications, because business leads have a particular role in the work within the application itself, but that business steward is hopefully what we envision. So this was clear back in the Rhonda Toronto days, right? Rhonda was drawing these buckets out, right? But the thought was that we needed to have a way to be able to step back. So kind of these hierarchies, right? So as the business lead, you're right in the middle of like fighting it out, right? Like you got all of this work that you're trying to do and all these things you're trying to balance and you're really focused on this one, delivering this one capability. That's part of project management. You're always got this pressure. And then you've always got your project manager going schedule, scope, and budget, right? And the business lead is like, no, but I want this, right? So there's always this intense engagement that's potentially going on a project level. But with the business stewards, what we wanted to be able to do is have a body that could take a step back and go, okay, I can see what's going on with this application, this application, this application, this application in this functional area or in this business subject area, so that we start gaining these insights in, because what we were trying to do at the time that we started developing this, is the program board was having every application come in and do this presentation about what was going on, right? And Rhonda was like, that's not gonna work for us. Like, we have to have a way, we have to have kind of like a business SME that has the ability to look across this to help us prioritize. So that was kind of where that came from. So that idea of the DMC being the business steward for those applications has been there since 2018.
But wouldn't there be a conflict of interest with that? Specifically because the data committee pretty much owns EEG and IDME because those are applications.
Edge is the other one, yeah.
Yeah, so those are the applications that you guys are standing up. So I see that as a conflict of interest, because if we have people in the community coming to Irwin and asking us to put, a new data element or new data in Irwin, and we have a business need to do that, so Kara works through it. And then it goes to you guys and you're like, well, it's supposed to be an IDME or EDG or any of our other systems. So no, you guys can't do that. We're going to put it in those instead. I feel like you kind of made a comment that as the business steward, you're supposed to be able to step back and make that decisions, but those systems are being project managed by you guys rather than being project managed in.
I don't think that's the intent.
No, that's not the intent. And in my mind, that there's Irwin's functionality is clearly different from IDME and from Edge, and to me but I do think that this is part of the discomfort, right? Like, so when we start talking about governance and we start talking about providing enterprise capabilities, it's the place where we kind of start going a little uncomfortable, because it is a fine line between being able to say, okay, this is actually something that we need to solve at an enterprise level. And that whole thing, Steve, that really good project decisions are really bad enterprise decisions. Well, if we're only making decisions at the project level and we don't have a way to engage at the enterprise level, then who knows how many decisions are made that brought us to the point that we are now, where we have all these application silos and we're trying to figure out, like years later, how we make the better decisions about integrating the data. So the role of the business steward is to be able to say, okay, we're looking at this, like, it's like, so what Ani would say is it's a type of data mesh governance approach, which says you've got domains and a particular domain area is going to be responsible for their data, but that could be in multiple applications. So we're looking at like, how then does that data work together? And we have to have a way, like where I'd really love to see this go is that there's a way that a group can say, so fire environment can say, and they're actually going through this process. So it's going to be a great learning opportunity for us all. But for fire environment, it's going to be looking at the applications in their section of the portfolio and being able to say, okay, well, where should we have this data be created? And where should this model be run? And where should so they're going to be looking at it more from the business perspective and trying to help reduce or eliminate those potential redundancies or conflicts so that it works better for the business. Now, the applications that the data management committee has business stewardship for, are like, they serve enterprise functions, multiple business areas, and they're super data capability focused. So that's the idea behind business stewards. And that's different than data stewards, because the data stewards are going to be functioning at a different level, and their data stewards are, there's a difference.
So I think, Brandon, if it makes you feel better, don't forget Rochelle has the ACDO responsibility too, which is an enterprise responsibility. But if there really is a conflict there's an elevation process, right? Which could go to the program board. So it's, if that happens, right? If there is a conflict of interest, or if there's a perceived conflict of interest, there's an elevation process. But also keep in mind, Rochelle does have as the ACDO had, she's got that responsibility too.
It's part of the work too, for those that are a little bit squishy, right? There are some things that are a little bit squishy. And that's why we know, like all the business lead type people and all the project managers, et cetera, do so much legwork to socialize these concepts. You know, it's funny, what's your job? I took a phone, because I'm constantly, talking, visiting with different groups here, what we're thinking, what do you think, what's your input, what are we missing, all that kind of stuff, because there are some, especially like let's just look at the dispatch side of the house, and I think it's probably rated for this too, but National Center Managers is not an NWCG committee, but it's super important that we visit with that group.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's these NMAC, there's these people that to bring into these kinds of conversations as we're having them, that we don't want to ignore, because we have a business steward. There's all this other piece that needs to happen as well. So it's not an or, it's an and.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is that while my PD actually has some uncomfortable responsibilities assigned to me sometimes, it's the DMC. And so it's not me, it's not Cole, it's the committee as a whole. And the intent behind that is that the committees of the NWCG have that interagency representation, and the DMC in particular has the agency representation and the business, we have business area representation, because we have a lot of liaisons that come in from different committees and different business areas. And so.
Well, and I think I'll call them out or anything, but in the change boards, and I know like IROC does a great job with, if here's a particular thing that we're working on, so we know we need to include these other groups, right? Mm-hmm. And here's another thing that we need to work on, and I think all of the systems are doing the same thing, right? Like, oh, this could impact a fire planner, this could impact, somebody, an informed user, et cetera. So try to have those conversations. So it's not to say that we would ever reduce those.
Yeah.
So Rick's hand is getting tired on that.
Rick's not getting tired. Go ahead, Rick.
I'm biting my tongue the whole time. So I got to say, I am uncomfortable is not strong enough a word. I would say opposed to the idea of NWCG committees as business stewards for applications. And I think there are some cases where it might be a great solution, but I also think that advancing that as this is a good idea across the board is a terrible way to go forward. And the reason being, I understand we are looking for some enterprise perspective on applications. That's great. And maybe we look at NWCG as, oh, that's our enterprise. But I don't think that's the standing we're looking for. You mentioned DMC has some interagency representation. How many of the folks on DMC are in paid dedicated positions for the DMC?
One.
I mean, how many people work full time for DMC? All the committees that I know of are 100% collateral duty. Folks from varied backgrounds, you know, who the representatives who have a passion in the field and were able to squirrel away some time from their normal desk job. And I think putting a group of those people who may or may not have great background and perspective for us, and then setting them in a position of authority over the applications sets us up to be waiting on the monthly or quarterly call when those groups actually get together and talk. It sets us up for another layer of process, and it sets us up for input that may or may not actually be representative of the field that we're actually trying to serve with these applications. I think we can definitely point to some cases where it's a great idea and we should absolutely do it. And I think that applications working and talking with those committees that deal with some of our subject areas is a really good plan. It's something that we do all the time. But setting them up as having oversight authority makes me super nervous.
Yeah, I don't think that we would say oversight authority. I would say, so for example, when Irwin was struggling with folks saying, hey, there's no process, there's no change management process, then the responsibility of the DMC as the business steward for Irwin was to help develop that process. And we wanted to do it in a way that didn't make Irwin have to solve it. We wanted to solve it at a level that helped take some of the pressure off of Irwin. Now, there are different committees that are going to have different levels of engagement, but, you know, and like I said, you know, my favorite quote from Roy Johnson, all models are wrong, some are useful. NWCG is not perfect, right? And it's not a complete answer. There is no way that we can say that NWCG is 100% solution to what it is that we're looking for, but it is a smart place to be able to be coordinating. And it has interagency representation, and some committees are going to be more engaged and involved than others. And that's just part of the process. But when we have, there are instances where you need to get a quick perspective from a variety of people, and the committees are an easy way to do that. And some, like I said, some are going to be more engaged than others. So I wouldn't say authority, it is, so stewardship is not authority, right? Stewardship is more service and responsibility in my mind. And so, you know, I think as the co-chair of DMC, Cole and I, you know, we look at it and we say, what that means for us is that we have a responsibility to those projects to help and support and understand what's happening, representing them when there were issues that maybe need to be elevated, helping pave that way, helping coordinate. That's the type of stuff that I expect a business steward to be doing. And also the DMC is a little bit unique in the NWCG world. There's only 2 committees right now that have a permanent chair. DMC is one of them because my position, the DMC wants my position to be the permanent chair, And Equipment Technology Committee also, Dave Haskins' position, I don't know who's in it right now. It's not, I don't know if it's been filled, but his position, the position that Dave Haskins was in before is the permanent chair of the Equipment Technology Committee. And NIAC got a request in to fill a position that would be a permanent chair of NIAC. So trying to deal with some things that way, but with DMC, it really is it is unique, and because we function differently than the other NWCG committees, we are a little bit different, but that's why we went with, and
okay to say a lot.
a lot different.
Okay. I think though, these are some of those places, back to Jill's question. These are some of those places we talk about downloading Larrabee's brain.
Yeah.
This stuff, I don't know is written anywhere for that clarity. What does it mean, right? Some of that reference data that we talked about can fall into it as far as policy, but some of these things can be highlighted, acknowledged, written and documented somewhere. Because that was super helpful. And I've been doing this for a really long time. You know what I mean? So that was really helpful to me because it's just, because the word is tough. The words matter, and what I might think it meant and what you might think it meant and what, somebody else in this room might have been different. And that's when I think that's bad, because that means I could be relaying it differently somewhere. We need to just stop.
What are 4 Bs? Common voice.
Oh, yes.
Well, just like our sign outside, wild and fire. That's not what I told them, but that's what they interpreted. Because words matter, and it didn't get clear, and so they did what they could.
Yeah.
Cheryl has her hand up.
Hey, Cheryl.
Hey, I'm gonna tag on to what Rick was talking about. I also am not in favor of stewardship being at the application level. And I think anything that fire environment goes into and what we're doing in fire environment is going to reveal what really needs to happen. So, I mean, I've been trying to deal with governance with FEMS. Fire danger is a combination of weather, of a model, and then it also ties into all these other places where it's used that have actual business stewards of that that thing that is coming from a fire environment model. So as you rip that apart, then what you have to start to look at is the business. What do we need for the business for fire environment? Well, one of the big changes being talked about within FENCE is to get full agency representation, almost like a mini exec board. Why? Because that is what we need to be able to be the business for fire environment. We need all 3 regions of NASF. We need all of the bureaus. We need the people that are SMEs from those bureaus. Like, looking at this stuff is requiring changes to our structures, and there is no way to say like, WFDS, oh, that belongs to this committee. No, it doesn't. Because there's a fire environment piece, there's decision support pieces, there's planning pieces, like there's risk pieces, there's several different committees that are needing to be stewards for that one application, depending on what kind of data you are talking about in that. And data standards is the same thing. I mean, we're wrestling with that. Adjective rating. That is actually something that we need to work on, and I need to go to CEPC and get them involved with this. But then we're also looking at another layer of governance too, that is more on the like budget and policy side of things. So what does that look like? And this is where you start to like pull it apart and you look at everything from like a data and a capability. Like I'm starting to identify capabilities that might end up in the EGP type of geospatial capability realm. Is fire environment the steward of that, or are we going to end up with like there's data stewards, there's business stewards, there's capability stewards? I don't know. I think we have to be open to like look at all of this in this conversation, because I can't really say that the framework that it currently exists and the way that committees have, you know, like who is on a committee, that all of that is like the best way to do things. So just speaking from experience of what has been going on with fire and environment, the governance piece is huge, but it also, we've got to rip things apart before I think we actually know how to put it back together.
That's why you guys are is the subject area we're focusing on.
I think Cheryl was speaking to the purple slice of the pie I was talking.
That's right, the purple slice of the
There you
pie. So no, I think you're right. And there are things like, well, this is really complicated. So it's not likely that you're gonna have one committee, but you know, there's other places where the NICAD committee, is it NICAD? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
What is the CADS committee?
We've NICADs, but we have like a wildcat change, right? So it's not specific to one application, and that's where it gets squishy to Rick's point, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's sort of a tentacle to community, how we can communicate and balance things off, right? And so there's kind of what you said, it's not day to day.
It's not day to day.
Not the day to day prioritization.
It's a point that functions well for some and not for others. I totally get it, but you know, the governance structure is really complex. I mean, Steve has a slide that he's passed around for a long time, and it's really a simplification of it, but it's so complex when you look at it. Everywhere that we have governance, like there is no, like you ever look at the organizational structures, you know, it is across wildland fire, how we do governance is absolutely insane. And, you know, we just have to kind of do the best that we can. And yes, it's not perfect. We totally get that, but sometimes it can be helpful. And so that's really what we're trying to get at. And if we don't have any sort of structure at all, then it's just the Wild West, and how, you know, it's even worse. So trying to have some structure. And I think that was part of why when we had that offsite for the fire environment program several months ago, back in October, the consensus was like, we looked across all of these different places that group, and it was like, it has to be fence. Everything has to be coordinated through fence. To me, that's the role of a business steward. The fence is acting as a business steward. Now, that doesn't mean that they take care of every single minute detail, but there is a coordination role that falls within NWCG scope that makes sense because there's not anything else. And the thing is, like, I'll tell you, like, I really don't want to be on another committee or another group doing the same thing with the same people. It's just, you know, there's also a efficiency and scale of, yeah. So it's an imperfect model, totally get it, but we're trying to bring some order to it at some level.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's a good conversation, and I like it. One size
Doesn't fit all.
And they're supposed to be there to support and help, right?
Support and help.
That is the idea behind it, and maybe, you know, not work in a vacuum. All of these things that they're to resolve for. And so each committee, like to Rick's point, or each application has its own processes. Is it something that you're throwing out there? Is here's an option, here's something.
Yeah, I mean, we can be flexible, right? We can be flexible, right? Call an audible if the group doesn't look right.
Right. Well, that's
Expand
what the fire environment group is doing, is that they, you know, as part of that discussion, they looked at what the current configuration of fence is and what the role is that they think fence needs to be playing. And they're like, this is not the right composition. We need to change the membership.
So,
And so they can do that.
Yep.
So, okay, so we're coming, it's 4:27. Lori is done.
And Lori still has to work some more tonight. Unfortunately.
So, I appreciate this conversation. It's, you know, what we don't get very often are opportunities to just kind of like talk about things that it's easy to make assumptions that we all understand or all on the same page about. And so I really appreciate you guys being willing to say, no, that is like way messed up, Rachel. What the heck are you thinking?
I like the uncomfortable conversations.
You like it because you're in the back of the room.
Well, no, then everybody talking little pockets. but-
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
Better to air the grievances.
I would much rather hear it in the room than have you sit quietly and walk outside and go, what a mess, right? Like, we're never gonna solve anything. We're never gonna get anywhere if the conversations are going on in the hallway and not in this room. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about the DMC is we have difficult conversations sometimes, and I've had the DMC members call me on stuff before, and I really appreciate that because it's the only way that we actually get where we want to go and we're willing to be uncomfortable together.
Well, one of the key things that Sarah said was not in a vacuum.
Not in a
That's-
vacuum.
That triggered, it was like, yeah, it's where we need to be airing it and talking about it.
Yeah, if we don't, and the thing is that, you know, there are occasions when you have this grievance, right? Or there's this issue and it's a challenge and you bring it up in a group, somebody's like, I have the answer to that, right? But if you don't say anything, you never get that person that actually has the answer or can help. So appreciate the conversation. So tomorrow is going to be focused on Irwin. So we're looking at the V10 plan, business plan. You guys should all have the draft of that. And hopefully if you haven't looked at it, you have a chance to look at it tonight after dinner or before dinner. So we'll be having conversations about potential features for V10. And so we'll have an IIPA presentation. So we'll have a little better understanding about that and kind of see where that lands us. So this is the flip that we're doing. Instead of making the go, no go decisions about Irwin features in the fall, this was the big lift to get it to the spring so that folks have more development time. Good job, Irwin team, yeah. So, okay, 6 o'clock at the warehouse. See you guys.
What time we starting?